Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through step by step how I was able to create this photo manipulation that you see on the screen. First, we're going to start by choosing our Canva. In this case, I'm going to be using 1920 by 1080 pixels, and once you select your Canva of your preference, you want to go ahead and hit on create. I'm going to start by importing my foreground. In this case, it's going to be this photo right here. Hold down your shift key and resize it and make it fit to your Canva just the way I'm doing like this, and then you want to hit on the good. In order for me to be organized, I want to go ahead and rename this to be like river. I always like to rename my layers so that later on it will not be confusing. And now I need to go ahead and bring in this foggy forest. And just as we did before, I want to go ahead and resize the forest to make it fit to my Canva just like this. Go ahead and hit on the good sign, and as well I want to come back to the foggy and rename it to be forest. And now what I can possibly do is to come back to this forest and add a layer mask. Once you do that, you want to make sure you're selecting the layer mask and hit on B from your keyboard to have the brush tool. In this case, I'm going to be using the soft round brush. Is going to be this brush right here. I want to decrease the size just like this, and I can start painting to remove some of the parts. And make sure your foreground color is set to black by hitting on, else the color is going to change to black. And I want to start painting just like this. I can still go ahead, increase the flow to be like 100% and the opacity to be like 100% as well. And I want to be blending this foggy forest to this foreground just like this. There's no rules to do this. It's going to depend on the image that you're working with. Okay, something like this is going to be nice. And once we have it like this, what I need to do is to blend this foggy forest to this field, to this foreground color. And by doing that, I want to come back to the adjustment and come back to color banner. Make sure you clipped the adjustment layer to the layer in question. And now I want to add some green to this foggy, okay, and as well add some yellow to have that greenish color so that it will color match the field to something like this. Okay, something like this we already okay. And the next thing I can possibly do is to go ahead and bring in the measure, the timberland. It's going to be this photo right here. I want to go ahead and hit on the good sign, Ctrl+0 to have the big screen. And what I can possibly do is to hit on W from my keyboard to have the quick selection tool and come back to the select subject to select the show right here. And once it's been selected, there might be some parts that you will need to correct. I want to hold down my Alt and remove this part right here just the way I'm doing it like this. And once everything is been selected, you've been convinced, you want to come back to the layer mask and mask it out just like this. Hit on V to have the move tool. And now I want to try to place this timberline, this shoe, in a place that is going to make sense. In this case, I can even place it somewhere here. Ctrl+1 to zoom out, and it's going to be something like this. I can still go ahead and resize my shoe to be something of this nature, and then place it somewhere here just like this. And once I have it like this, I want to go ahead and hit on the good sign. Just like every other layers, I need to go ahead and rename my layer to be shoe. And what I can possibly do right now is to come back to the adjustment layer and come back to the levels and make sure the levels is clipped to the shoe just like this. And I want to add some contrast to the shoe and at the same time remove some of the highlight from the shoe. Like this is perfect. And the next step is going to be for us to bring in the pathway. In this case, it's going to be this pathway right here, this photo. I want to go ahead and hit on the good sign, hit on W to have the quick selection tool, and you want to come back to select subject. You're going to wait for some seconds for your subject to be selected, and once it's been selected, you want to come back to the layer mask and mask it out just like. Hit on V to have the move tool, and this pathway you want to hold down your control key to try and level it to the shoe to something of this nature just like this. And you want to shift it to be in a good position, just maybe somewhere here. Something like this is going to be okay, and you want to hit on the good. The next thing we can possibly do again is to hold down your Alt and drag this other one right here to create a new layer. And once you've done that, you want to hit on Ctrl+T and right click and come over to flipped horizontal. It's going to be something like this. You want to drag it to the other side to create the other pathway for the dog. So something like this is going to be okay. And I can as well reduce the size to like this and hit on the first part as well and make it to be something like this. We can always come over to this later on in the video, but for now we're going to leave it just like this. Hit on the good sign. And now the next thing we can possibly do is to go ahead and bring in the door. In this case, it's going to be this photo right here. You want to hit on enter. You want to go ahead and hit on P from your keyboard. just to have the pen tool. You can actually use any of the tool of your choice, the one you feel comfortable with. But to me, I feel the pen tool is going to be more easy with these case. And make sure you are using the part and not the shape. You just want to click here, okay, and click here once more and come back to the bottom line and repeat the same process. Just with 4 dots here, you're going to have this selected. And what I can possibly do is to right click on this door and come back to make selection. I just want the radius to be 5 pixels and I want to go ahead and hit on OK. Now I want to hit on W once more to have the quick selection tool, and I want to right click and come back to layer via copy. Now we're going to have this door in a new layer, and this main layer I can go ahead and delete it so that it will remain just the door. I want to hit on V to have my move tool and hold down my shift key to resize this door in a way that is going to fit this shoe, just like this. Okay, resize it again and make it to be somewhere here. Ctrl+0 to have the big screen, and I want to hold down my shift once more and resize it to something like this. Okay, I want this part where the two pathway meet to be the center, and I want to place the door to be the center as well, to something like this. And now what I can possibly do is to hit on this first pathway right here, this bridge, and I want to come over to the layer mask. Once I'm the layer mask, I want to hit on B to have my brush tool, decrease the size to something like this, and I want to remove this size just like this, decrease the size once more, and I can as well hit on Z, zoom in to the image, and hit on B again to have the brush tool, decrease the size once more, and I want to remove this part right here just like this, something like this. Okay, and once you have it like this, you want to hit on V to have your move tool and select the other bridge, the other pathway, and make sure as well you're selecting the layer mask. Hit on B again to have the brush tool, and now I want to remove this part as well to something like this, and come over here and remove this part as well. Now this line where they intersect, I want to decrease my brush tool and remove this sharp line to be as if the intersection is here and not one being on top of the other. I want to make something to be of this nature. Okay, and I can select this one again and make sure it's been brush tool and just remove this part just like this. And now if you hit on Ctrl+1, you're going to have something like this. And the next thing I need to do, I always like to be organized with my work. I want to hold down the Control key and select the two bridges, the two pathway, and hit on Ctrl+G to group everything. I want to rename this group so as to be organized and name it to be bridge. It's going to be something like this. Now I need to go ahead and bring in the window. It's going to be this image right here. What I need to do is to hit on W and come back to the object selection tool. In this case, we are going to be using object selection and not the quick selection tool. I want to draw just a rectangle or a square around this window just like this. Wait a little bit for Photoshop to do the work. Once it's been selected, I want to come out to the layer mask and mask it out just like this. Hit on V to have my move tool, and now I want to hold down shift as well to decrease the size. And I still need to go ahead and decrease the size and make it fit somewhere here. Still go ahead and decrease the size once more to something like this, and you want to place it in anywhere of your choice where it's going to make sense. But in this case, it's going to be something like this, and go ahead and hit on enter. What I can do right now is to go ahead and rename this to be window and hit on enter. I need to double click on this window to have the layer style, and once I'm here I want to come out to the drop shadow and add just small shadow like this, something of 4 pixels, and I want to go ahead. Okay, the same thing is going to happen to the door. Double click on the door to have the layer style, and as well come out to the shadow and add some shadow. On that, you want to go ahead and hit on OK. The next thing we can possibly do again is to go ahead and bring in the roof. In this case, it's going to be this image right here. I want to go ahead and hit on enter, hit on W from my keyboard to have the quick selection tool and select the subject. You're going to wait for a few seconds. There might be some mistake here. This part is not being selected. You just need to hover your button to the main object to select the other part just like this. And once you've been convinced, you want to come out to the layer mask and mask it out as well. Now press on V to have your move tool and hold down your shift to reduce the size to something like this, and try to place it in a way that is going to make sense, to be as if it's the roof that is going to be holding the rain. Something like this is going to make sense already perfect like this. Just take it down a little bit, maybe to something of this nature, and it's going to be okay. You want to go ahead and hit on the good sign. Now you can hit on Ctrl+0 and as well select the layer of this shoe, okay, and come back to the layer mask and hit on B to have your brush tool just increase the size a bit and make sure the opacity and the flow is 100. Just need to remove this part right here. Okay, now that we have it like this, what I need to do is to go ahead and hide most of these layers. Go ahead and hide the door and even the bridge. And the next thing we can possibly do is to select this shoe. Okay, once we're here, select the layer mask as well and take your brush tool. In this case, we want to try to blend this shoe to the river and to the field. I want to decrease the opacity and my flow as well. Now I just want to color here. Make sure your foreground color is black and try to blend this shoe to the field and to the river to be as if it's deep down inside the field and as well inside the river to something of this nature. Just go ahead and blend it like this. Now it's as if the shoe is inside the field and inside the water as well. Okay, so something like this is going to make sense. And now I can go ahead and bring in all of our materials again to something like this. Now it's going to make more sense. What I need to do right now is to select the layer of this shoe. Okay, and I want to go ahead and add a new layer and make sure the layer is clipped to the shoe. Take your brush tool and make sure your foreground color is black. Okay, and I want to increase the size to something like this. And what I need to do is to add some shadows to this part right here. It's too harsh. Ctrl+Z, and I want to reduce the opacity to be something of this nature. And right now I just want to add some shadow of this roof here. Okay, the light is not going to be meeting this part, so that we need to darken this part and this part as well. Okay, we increase the size to be something like this. Okay, something like this is going to be very nice. The light is not going to be meeting this part. And as well, I want to select this roof right here, this roof in question. And firstly, I still need to go ahead and rename it just to be organized and come back to the adjustment and select levels. Make sure the levels is clipped to the roof. I want to add some contrast to this roof to something of this nature. What I can possibly do is also add some shadows. Since some light is going to be here, light is going to be here, we need this part to be dark since the light is not going to be meeting that part. And for that, we need to come out to the adjustment again and come out to exposure. Make sure it's clipped to the roof, and I want to add some exposure like this. Okay, and once like this, I want to click on the layer mask and hit on Ctrl+I to invert the color, the selection. And now I want to hit on B as well and decrease my brush size to be something of this nature, and make sure this time around the foreground color should be set to white since we are going to be doing some light. And now I just need to go over here. Firstly, I still need to go ahead and increase the opacity of the brush and just add some light here, just like this. Okay, something like this. And this part as well, we just need the light to be here just like this. Okay, this part, sharpen this part more. Okay, so something like this. This part, the light is not going to be meeting there. Something like this is going to be nice. And now what I can possibly do as well is to select this shoe. Okay, once I have the shoe, I'm going to come back to the adjustment and select exposure as well. Once I have the exposure, make sure it's clipped to the shoe. And now I want to increase the exposure to something of this nature and come back to the layer mask as we did before. Ctrl+I to invert the color. Select the layer mask and make sure your foreground color is set to white. Hit on B to have your brush tool. You can even increase the size. Since there is light here, because we are using this light, this cloud, there are going to be a lot of reflection on this side of the shoe, just like this. Okay, the light is going to be meeting these parts. And maybe some part here. Okay, and this part is going to be something like this. Nice. And now the next thing we need to do is to go ahead and bring in the boy, the running boy, which in this case is going to be this little child right here. You want to come over here and try to resize and place it in a way that it will look good in your eye. In this case, something here is going to be nice. I want to go ahead and hit on OK. But the next thing I can possibly do as well is to select this part wheel, these bridges, and select their group. In this case, it's going to be this group right here. I want to come out to the adjustment and come out to levels. Make sure the adjustment is being clipped to the group. And now I want to add some contrast to this part wheel to something of this nature. And now I can come back to this wheel and select this wheel and hit on Ctrl+J, or just hold down your Alt and drag it to create a new layer. You can go ahead and hit on Ctrl+J to have the duplicate of this wheel, and I can go ahead and hold down the Control button and try to flip it to something of this nature, to something like this. And right click and come over to warp. Make sure the both legs are touching each other to something like this. And even if this light is not too sharp, we just need little shadow. This layer in question, double click to have the layer style and come out to the color overlay and choose black. To do that, you want to go ahead and hit OK. Come back to the opacity and reduce the opacity because the shadow is not going to be sharp to something very light like this. And once you have it that way, you want to come back to filters and come back to blue and then select Gaussian blue. It's going to be something like this already. Okay, we just need that dull shadow, not very sharp, since this light's already dull, and go ahead on OK. It's going to be something like this. And this where as well, I can still go ahead and come back to the adjustment and select some level. Make sure it's clipped to the well and just add some contrast to the boy to something like this. Now the next thing I need to do is to bring in this dog that was running as well and try to place it on the other bridge, on the other part of the bridge to something here and hit on enter. Okay, it's gonna be like this. What I can do right now is to go ahead and select this dog, add a new layer above it, and once I have a new layer, I want to hold down my Alt and clip this layer to the dog. Doing that, you want to hit on Z to zoom into the picture, and what I can possibly do right now is to select this layer and hit on B to have my brush tool, decrease the size to something like this. We can try the opacity and the flow at this range. You can just try to add some shadow just like this to make the leg touch ground, something like this. And again, hit on V and select this path wheel. Select this path wheel. You want to go ahead and add a new layer above the path wheel and hold down your Alt to click this layer to the path wheel. And now you can select the new layer that you just created and take your B again and just try to add some shadow like this to make the leg touch ground. And the same thing is going to happen to here. These legs are up, they're not going to be touching ground. And this one as well need to touch something like this. And we still need to repeat the same process by selecting the first layer of which we use here that was clipped to this dog and just try to blend it. Ctrl+ Z and just try to blend like this, make the leg to touch ground just like this. And now Ctrl+1 to zoom out. Okay, I'm gonna come up with something like this. Right now I need to go ahead again and select this path wheel. Make sure in this case I'm selecting the group, the boot, and come back to the adjustment layer as well and select something like exposure and make sure the exposure is clipped to the bridge. And now I want to go ahead and add some exposure, just something like this. Okay, once you have it like this, you want to come out to the layer mask and hit on Ctrl+I to invert the selection. Hit on B to have your brush tool and increase the size, and I can still go ahead and reduce the opacity to be like 30 something. Since there is this light here, obviously it's going to be meeting this part, and I want to go ahead and add the light to that side. And the further away is going to be more dark, so I'm going to stop here. And this same part, the light is not going to be meeting here, but it's going to be meeting this part right here. Okay, do something like this. That is okay. And the next thing I can possibly do is to select this foreground, this river, and once I'm here, I want to come back to the adjustment as well and select exposure. Make sure it's clipped, and I want to add some exposure like this, just as we did before. Ctrl+I to invert the selection and select the layer mask. Hit on B to have your brush tool. This light that's reflecting is going to be meeting this part. Obviously this part is dull, it's going to be meeting here, and it's going to be meeting part of this side of the river. Okay, something like this. Going to be meeting here, it's not going to be meeting here, and this part we can just brighten this part as well. Okay, something like this is okay. Right now the next thing I can possibly do is to go ahead and bring in these birds, and once I have this bird, I want to come back to the blending mode and select darken. Hold down your shift and try to resize the flocking birds to something like this, and I want to paste them somewhere here. And it's like this darkening is not working well because there are still some background here. You can still go ahead and select from darken to something like color bond. Once you have it like this, still go ahead and resize it to something like this and just try to place it somewhere here and hit on OK. The next thing I can possibly do is to go ahead and decrease the opacity of the birds to be as if they are inside the cloud to something maybe like this. Still go ahead, OK, to be like as if they are inside cloud. Now this is going to make sense. And right now I want to go ahead to to the first layer and come back to the adjustment and add level adjustment. I want to add some contrast to everything to be like this. Okay, just like this is going to be nice. And then I want to come over to the last step. In this case, we are going to be using the red, which is going to be this photo right here. You're going to have it like this. Hold down your shift and try to place it to fit the canvas, something of this nature, and come to this side as well and repeat the same process. Go ahead and hit on the good side and come over to the blending mode. In this case, we are going to be using the lightning or the screen. I can use the screen in this case because it looks nice, and it's going to be something just like this. It's going to be as if it's raining heavily and there is this dog and this little child that is trying to run into their house. In this case, it's going to be this shoe. And the next thing I can possibly do, this is going to be optional. It's not going to be compulsory, just optional. I can go ahead and create a new layer. Once I have a new layer like this, I want to take my brush tool, and in this case I'm going to be using this special brush, and it's going to be something like this. We're going to be adding some smoke to this our environment, and the kind of smoke I need is going to be something like this. The opacity and the flow is, let's test this out if it's going to work. And I want to, it's too light, Ctrl+Z. Let me go ahead and increase the opacity to be like 50 something. And now let's go ahead, and it's still very light. I can still increase the opacity to be like 70 something right now. And let's add some of this smoke like this, even to some of this part, although it's not so vivid and it's optional as well. Okay, I just need it like this. It's optional, like I said before. You don't have it, just maybe to this part as well. Okay, it's like this is nice. And right now what I need to do is to select the first layer and hit on Shift, Alt and Control, and then press on the letter E to have everything on a single layer. And I want to right click and come back to Convert to Smart Object, and then head over to Filter and come over to Camera Raw Filter just to beautify our design and make it more dramatic. You want to toggle over this to have the before and after. It's optional, but I just like to do things my own way like that. Okay, and we can start with the exposure by making it negative and add some of the contrast to something like this. The highlight can decrease the highlight to something of this nature. And for the shadow, I want to make it positive to like this. I don't need the white and the black. I want to make it negative, just to add some black to our design to like this. Okay, and come back to the color. Here is where you can give a specific tone to your design. You can then make it more hot or more cool like this. For this case, let's leave it in between here. And the tint, you can either add more green or you add more purple to something like this. But let's add some green like this. It's gonna be something of this nature. Negative 32. The vibrance and the saturation, I don't need them. I want to come out to the effect. Here is where you're going to make it to be more dramatic. I want to increase the texture to something like this, and as well increase the clarity, make it more dramatic to something like this. Okay, what I can possibly do is to come out to the vignette and make it maybe negative 21. It's going to make sense like this. Okay, the curve, I don't actually need anything from the curve. And the color mixer, the only thing I can touch should be maybe the red, the roof. Just add some saturation to like this, and every other thing is okay. Or I can as well touch the shoe and add some saturation to the shoe to something like this, and add some light as well only to the shoe because of the light that is inside. It's gonna be something just like this. And the last thing I would like to do is to come back to the details and add some sharpness, something of this nature. This is the before and this is the after. We just go ahead and hit on the OK sign. We're gonna come up with design like this. Ctrl+0 to zoom in, Ctrl+1 to zoom out. We're gonna come up with something very beautiful, just like this. You can see the way it looks. This is the one that we created for this video, and this is another dimension of it again, of the same design, and this is another dimension of the design as well. And this one right here is the same thing, but just that everything was different. I tend to make it this way on my own, but at the end I feel that it's going to make sense if there is daylight, just like this, just like what we created here. More daylight than this. Maybe some people might prefer this and some people might prefer this, but in this video we make this. I didn't follow this procedure to make something like this. In any way, everything still remains the same step. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you do go ahead and give me a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so that whenever I make another video just like this, you will always be the first person to be notified. And having said this, I'm going to see you in the next video. Cheers. Peace out.